Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plethora of Change, which is a podcast where we talk with inspiring women about how they're making change in their own communities. Today, we have a very special guest who is using her social skills to make connections between people and organizations. Please welcome Zeynep.
Thank you so much, Idam. It's lovely to be here.
It's lovely to have you. If you could introduce yourself without introducing your work yet, how would you define who you are?
Thank you for asking that question. And I think it's a nice touch that you say without describing your work, because I think more often we jump to just what we do when we talk about ourselves. And I think we're so much more than just what we do for work. And if I think about myself as an individual, I consider myself a connector. So I like to, for instance, bring different women together for friendships. Especially because I live in the Netherlands, it can sometimes be lonely if you've just moved here or it's been just a few years. So I consider myself a connector and a facilitator of meaningful connections. I also recently came across kind of a value statement by a pan-feminist organization called Akina Mama by Africa. And in their latest report, they said radical love as a moral compass. And I think radical love is something that really sits with me. So I think this is also why I connect and want to connect people.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do today in your work and how this radical love concept maybe also reflects in your work?
Yes, actually, that organization is an organization that we worked with over the past 5 years as well. But coming back to the organization I work at, it's called Liliane Fonds, and it's a Dutch organization that works on disability inclusion. And it's already 45 years old, so it's quite rooted. We work with valued partner organizations in many countries, now at least 19, sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. Our aim is to enhance the rights and well-being of children and young people with disabilities, to participate in their lives, but also by influencing their enabling environment. That means their families or their caretakers, faith leaders, community groups, service providers. So whichever community they live in, it's really important that because they live with a type of disability, that the stigma around them can also be reduced so that they can live up to their potential.
Yeah, that sounds very actually a cool change that you're working for, right? There are various types of disability in the world, and unfortunately, a lot of stigma comes around with it as well. How did you end up working in this position?
Actually, it's very niche, right? Disability inclusion. It is applicable to every thematic work. My background is international relations, and that is a very broad discipline. So I had a few experiences in different domains of the work we do in the Nexus, for instance, humanitarian, developmental, and peace building domains. And I also worked in the humanitarian part, but humanitarian is more emergency setting and it's more urgent, it's more now, whereas development is more in a long-term investment to problems that are just as urgent. I just wanted to try a few things that I really care about. And I think the first thing I did was people standing up for their rights, people knowing their rights, and people feeling entitled to exercise them. I think that was one thing that really motivated me to also work at a previous organization called Opinion, basically Your Opinion. There also we work with people who are affected by crises, which is also prominent. And moving from that, I wanted to also work in an organization that has very rooted interventions, that has very reliable partners, and we can talk about our impact very clearly over more than 10 years. I didn't necessarily have disability inclusion in my head, but I started mapping out developmental organizations in the Netherlands. And I just thought because disability inclusion can be applicable to any organization's work, be it Plan or Oxfam or AMREF, CARE, whichever profile group, as long as it's a children or a young person, if I work on something cross-cutting, I will get a chance to work with any other organization as well and talk about disability inclusion with them.
Yeah, actually, that's a very nice story of how your interest and your experience kind of led you into this place where you can use your skills into good use. I'm just wondering, because obviously the work that you do is quite important and I want to delve into that. But first, maybe we can also clarify, what is your role within this organization? Like, what do you do? What is your title? And what does an everyday life look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my role is called Partnership Development Lead. You can consider it as two things. First of them is proposal development. So for a project to start taking place, we first need to design it, and we need to co-design it with partners who are implementing it on the ground in the countries where we work. So we monitor funding opportunities by institutional donors. That can be governments, so bilateral donors. It can be UN agencies, for instance, so more multilateral organizations. And it can also be private foundations, such as, for instance, IKEA or Lego Foundation. We monitor the priorities of these kinds of institutional donors to see where we can embed disability inclusion into their call for proposals. And we start working from there. So I mostly work on sitting together with our partners to create paperwork, a theory of change, so that it can hopefully be selected and implemented. And another thing I do is talking to people, talking to those organizations that I just mentioned, other international NGOs, to co-fund track, co-design, or mainstream disability inclusion in their programs. For instance, you're doing an impactful program. How are you accounting for the rights of those with disabilities? So that's a question that I always ask. Any small actions underneath those two domains is how everyday work life looks like for me.
Is there a challenge to working with so many different actors and from different levels of involvement as well?
Yeah, there is, because there are context-specific limitations sometimes in enabling and empowering children and young people with a disability. We work on specific themes. This is not limited, so non-exhaustive, but we currently work with inclusive education, inclusive livelihoods, health and rehabilitation, because a majority of physical disabilities are there, but also sexual and reproductive health and rights. So in short, SRHR. And that is a very important theme. And it can be stigmatized even if you don't experience a disability, right? It can be a taboo topic depending on which country you're based in. And just like any other person, a child and a young person with a disability also has rights that they need to exercise regarding this topic. But in certain countries, for a partner organization to have track record in this theme can also be an existential problem sometimes, depending on the political situation, for instance. So even though you want to achieve change in that way, you also need to be mindful that an ideal we build is context sensitive. We will find opportunities where we can work on this theme, hopefully, but we also need to be careful not to push certain topics if the political environment isn't feasible for that, so that the organizations we work with can still continue to exist. This is a bit of a demotivating factor sometimes, but we also need to be patient and find solutions for that.
Yeah, I think it's often overlooked, right? Because when we think about change and development, sometimes there's a solution and we think, ah, that's it. And like, you just go for it and then everything is done. But then there's this reality that it needs to be context appropriate. You don't want to destroy the organization that you're partnering up with. And
Exactly.
yeah, like I think that's a really good insight to take in the development industry, that not every change needs to be pushed at the same speed as everyone thinks they can at another
Yeah,
location.
yeah, it's context sensitive.
Well, obviously, I think the work you do beyond partnerships is also quite hard because of the stigmas that are around the topic of disability inclusion. So, if you don't mind, I want to kind of get a little bit more insight into that as well. Could you tell us one thing that you've seen around the work of disability inclusion that it's not true, but a lot of people assume it's true, like a misconception around disability inclusion?
For instance, people tend to think that a person with a disability just can't do something because they're not able. But that is not true because a disability has different types. It can be a mental disability, it can be a physical disability, it can be invisible. There are so many disabilities that are just not visible, and we still continue to treat people as we are. And it's important to empathize with that. A person with a disability is still able to do a lot of things. And actually, a kind of stigma that they overcome is also self stigma. Because as children, when we are growing older, we are also learning concepts
Yeah.
what this is or what that is, right? We all learn all of these things. So if people around you continuously tell you that you're not able to do something, you might also believe in that. And I think that is an important element of self stigma. We need to be mindful of the role we play in what we make people believe and how we make them feel about themselves.
Yeah, and when you put it like that, actually, my mind automatically also made a connection to gender, right? Obviously, we put people in these boxes of what someone should do and what someone should be able to do. And then in reality, those boxes just become a reality because we are taught that they are reality, whereas there is no underlying cause of like why a female person cannot be a leader, for example. So, do you also see any intersectionalities between disability and gender in your work?
Yes, thank you for asking that question because that is a really important element. I mean, we work with a human rights based approach, as you might already tell, and we focus on intersectionality that focuses on responding to a compounded marginalization. So, what does it mean, for instance, being a girl and also having a disability and also coming from an indigenous community in a rural area? Sometimes I can forget how many identities we can simultaneously hold, regardless if we have a disability or not. We have so many different identities. And if you are marginalized due to being a girl, imagine what your experience will be if you also have a disability, if you also live in poverty, and or if you also are alone. There are so many different elements that you need to consider in being marginalized. So we also work with intersectionality lens to make sure that we can account for different identities of a person with a disability in accommodating interventions that they need access to.
I assume that also makes the interventions quite difficult sometimes because you have all of these different characteristics that need attention, and to find a balance for something that works, it's also quite important.
It is definitely a detailed area. I think that's why we exist as an organization, that we are working with so many partner organizations that respond to different types of disabilities in different ways. There is a technical need for a comprehensive disability inclusion intervention. So it is possible to address all of these different kinds of needs that are also intersectional.
Could you maybe tell me what is like one main motivation for you to keep doing the work you do, although it is difficult?
I actually have an example for this because sometimes when I'm in front of my laptop, what I do can sometimes feel insignificant, just writing or researching stuff or learning about disability inclusion. And we obviously write all of these proposals to the kinds of donors that I have mentioned. And it can also be rejected. Or we write something on paper and we can't really visualize how it's going to look like in real life. You're not there all the time. You're not seeing what's happening. But then sometimes our various colleagues go to the project fields when we do have an accepted project, a funded project, and they make videos of what's happening there and what kind of impact it's making. And when we are listening to their experiences and we are seeing it in this footage, suddenly what we've written on a paper, kind of like a university project, becomes so real. Like, oh, this actually resulted in tangible things. I think that's my motivation. We have a project focused on inclusive livelihoods, Work and Better Life, co-funded by Dear After Foundation. And there, for instance, young people with a disability learn what they want to do in their lives in terms of a job. And some of them, for instance, become nail artists. They set up their own tour guide business, regardless of their disability, with specific safeguarding measures. And we watch their vlogs of how they get there, for instance. I think seeing those things keep me motivated to keep searching for more and keep doing what we are trying to achieve.
I think that's a beautiful reminder also for all of us to keep in mind that sometimes the work we do seems super removed, but sometimes that is all it takes to make impact. You don't need to be in the field yourself to make change for someone else.
It's like little rings of a chain.
Exactly.
You need to not underestimate the little role you can play in achieving a goal.
Well, what is feminism to you? Because obviously we're in this podcast where we're talking about gender and we're exploring different definitions of feminism. I'm also quite interested in your take on it.
To me, feminism is a movement primarily powered by women, but it's really for everyone. And those who understand that already participate in it, regardless of their different sexual orientation and gender identity expression or sexual characteristics. I think it's important to understand that feminism exists because there was a lack, and there is a lack of ensuring human rights, equal rights, and freedoms for all. And for those who are structurally denied it, need to be at the forefront of a discussion to try to introduce some kind of balance, which I don't think that we are near addressing. But every progress counts. And the fact that we can talk about these matters more openly than maybe 10 years ago is also progress. So I think it's pushing societies for equal participation of women and girls. And hopefully, not just by women, but also of other identities.
I feel the same. A movement that was started and led and driven mainly by females, but it's for everyone to be able to participate equally in society. How can we, as an audience, support your cause? And if we want to help in any way, what is the best way to help?
There are different ways. So, for instance, first of all, if you are someone who work with children and young people and inclusion, and these topics are interesting to you, regardless of what kind of organization you work at or you're affiliated with, you can reach out to me to discuss if we can work together, or how we can work together, or what we can do together, even if it's not work. And another thing is, if someone lives near Den Bosch, a city in the Netherlands, or they're based in the Netherlands, there are different volunteering opportunities at our organization. If you want to learn more about disability inclusion and support the cause. And finally, like many other INGOs, we also have a donation opportunity. So you can donate or share the donation link with other people around you to support the community-based work we do. But these are some examples of how we can work together. I always appreciate just a connection and a conversation outside of the financial aspect.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. It's not just about finances. Of course, finances are super important, but it's also about possible collaboration and how we can enforce each other's missions. With that in mind, I would like to ask you, what is one thing that you hope people take from this podcast as a final remark?
I would say, remember that not all disabilities are visible. That is actually a sticker that I have on my work laptop. And I got that sticker from a Greek artist based in Maastricht called Aphrodite's Art. And I really liked just the small things she did. Just her art gives me a lot of hope. And I've seen that she has made this sticker of like, not all disabilities are visible with this amplifier design. And I thought, okay, this is a really good sticker for me to have. And it also made me think, because it's not just even about mental disabilities, but really not all physical disabilities are also visible. So it just expands your way of thinking and empathizing. Inclusion is such a broad term. It's not just disability inclusion. So we really need to work together, really need to learn from each other. I mean, and we all have, all these different organizations have their programs already running. So we really need to just have more conversations about it And I'd like to thank you. I really appreciate the invite. I'm really looking forward to more podcasts and learning more about what other people do.
Thank you so much, Zeynep. It was a pleasure to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for
Thank you
accepting
so
to join,
much.
and we will see you at another podcast episode.
Thanks for
Bye.
listening. Bye bye.